I have questions on this RBAC prototype that I've been working on. And I think it comes down to a problem with hidden layers. So I've been like having really bad like lag and delay with interactions. And like I'll click on something and it doesn't do anything for like 10 or 20 seconds. And then it loads and the whole content works fine. And I think it's something to do with a bunch of problem with like hidden layers is what I was reading in one of the docs that somebody had shared. Trying to find an example, but like I have tons of like nested stuff, and like I'm basically the question is there a better or smarter way to optimize this sort of stuff? Considering the complexity that I have, or is this just a limitation of this type of process or tool that if I'm going to make a complex prototype that's super interactive, it's going to be kind of laggy or buggy. I thought like maybe I could try and improve this thing that Dan had helped me with early on in the process. There's like 5 versions of this component or this widget or interface, but they're all iterations of like one like this. So I thought like maybe that could be streamlined or improved somehow. So I'm kind of just looking for anybody else's opinions or insight or feedback on this.
How detailed, like, so you're building this prototype, I assume, to kind of test this out. Like how much do people need to be able to use like every single component versus like, is there kind of a little more linear path that you're pushing them through?
So the proposal or the research study that I'm going to do is basically telling the user to go into this new screen and create a custom role and give it a particular name and save it. So arguably then they have to go through, click on the screens, locate the particular permission that I'm going to tell them to find, select it, and then label the new custom role and then save the screen. But I think that's because of the complexity that I'm offering, where I have 5, 6 categories, and then they have 4 rows each, and 4 checkboxes in those 4 rows. Like there's a lot of interactivity, and that's where I'm like, maybe I overdid it.
I see. Yeah, it's like the nested stuff that tends to slow it down, where you have like like a checkbox that's interactive in a row that's interactive in a table that's that's where I've found at least it gets really slow. And so sometimes if you can like strip some of those down to like a single thing that changes, but it doesn't necessarily sound like that might be enough to get you what you want.
Well, I also thought maybe I could just reduce the interactivity in the prototype and just use static screens instead of having to load a component. But like that doesn't seem logical to me. That seems making it worse. That's where I started, and I had the same problem. And then I worked with Dan to try and componentize a lot of these pieces of the prototype, and it works great. It's really interactive and it does exactly what I want, but I'm still having problems with delay and lag.
That delay and lag, is that in the editing experience or in the prototype experience?
In the prototype with the users. So that's the thing, is like I'm going to test with users and I have them open up a prototype and they click on something and there's like nothing happens for 10-20 seconds. They're like, did that do something? It basically presents a problem with the testing experience. And also, like, I don't know what their computer is like. I don't know what their bandwidth, what their internet pipe is like. There's lots of variables.
Are you able to reproduce that regularly? Could you show it now?
Yeah, let me see real quick.
Yeah, I know you brought this one up, Dan, in the Figma Slack channel as well. It looks like my thing was to just maybe move the archive pages somewhere else. It looks like you did that. My other question is, do you have a lot of bitmaps maybe in the file?
There's only one on the first page, and that was it. Where is the screen?
Because it doesn't look like you have that many, screens in that flow, so it seems a little.
And I thought maybe it's my computer. So then I was like, well, if anybody else wants to test it or try it, see how it responds. So let's share my screen real quick. So I'm clicking on stuff and nothing happens. It does this every time. There we go.
Yeah, that's pretty laggy. That's not usable even.
And then like it's still lagging out right now.
And that's Safari you're using that in, is
This is
it?
Safari, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm just kind of playing along in Figma itself, and it's maybe less laggy, but there is still a bit of like a lockout period where it's transitioning.
So yeah, I was going to go through and start deleting all sorts of hidden layers and see if that would help first before I actually try and like re-engineer that component, right? To maybe instead of making 5 versions of it, make 1 version of it. But I don't know if that's possible.
Like-
It's no, go ahead, Nick.
I was gonna say, like, when I've run into this before, like I would say it's a less optimal solution, but what I've done is just sort of to make it more linear, where like your test becomes like, set the namespace to this option. So then you can like literally just make 1 page that's like the namespace is changed and you don't have any of the other things interactive. And then you move to the next step, which is like a new, so each page has like 1 interaction as opposed to 1 page with all of the interactions. I do think it's less optimal because you want people to, like, it's nice that they can go see like like they would in reality, but as a trade-off to the speed.
Yeah, and that's where I started with, right? Every page, every interaction had its own full screen. And I had similar problems there, but not this bad. Yeah, like getting rid of pages, getting rid of content, the archive thing, getting rid of that. I thought that would help also after Libor suggested that. But yeah, any other ideas, feel free to throw it in the in the agenda. But I don't think there's a simple solution or an easy answer, unfortunately.
I think there might.
Go
I
ahead.
think there might be.
Oh,
I've just
Depends
managed
on
to
what's got a
make.
good answer.
I've managed to make Figma do something I've never seen it do before,
oh,
which is this.
oh yeah.
Oh wow.
So
That's exactly what happens with this file or this prototype.
so it was when I switched from visible, like show me what's there, to show me wireframes and a bunch of hidden stuff that isn't actually there showed up, and I've got a suspicion that it's that hidden stuff.
Interesting. Okay.
We'll catch it now before it changes. But these columns should just be 1, 2, 3, and there's just 3 by 3. And if I flick it over before it crashes, if it's even going to let me, no, it gave me a flash and it was loads of stuff. Let me try zooming out a bit.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. So in the component library, the table has 5 columns or 6 columns, and I just disabled the visibility of them. So all the columns still exist. So you're suggesting delete every one that's not visible, which was my next step. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, you probably want your own component that is just exactly what you want it to look like, rather than
Mhm.
try and pull in, link in from the main library.
Mhm.
Just create something that only lives in this, similar to your my table cell. Maybe you make a new component that's just the three things next to each other or whatever, because there's a lot of hidden stuff. Let me do it again. Or is it just going to go straight to crash? No, straight to crash.
But I mean, that sounds like exactly what the problem is, because like I definitely know I've done that. I've made a bunch of hidden layers.
Let us
Yeah,
know how you get on.
yeah, that makes the most sense.
Is there a way to like audit what's using memory? Like I've hit that like once and
Mhm.
and I know I had a client that had a design system where they built all the interactions into the design system, and they were like, there was just warnings everywhere that was like detach and delete stuff, like do not hide, it will crash. So it's not
Yeah.
surprising, I guess.
I think
We can jump over to Alexis. Modal ideation within OKRs.
Yeah, I'm also having troubles with the prototype opening it. That's annoying. I'm sorry. I'm not a prototype wizard like Dan is, so Dan and Nick, it sounds like. Well, this is pretty simple. I just started looking at it like Friday evening and wanted to get y'all's thoughts. Let me open it first. All right, so and Nick, you probably have better knowledge of this than I do, but basically right now, Plan is working to open child objects in modals instead of, so for example, right now, I'm within an objective. If I open a KR within this, it opens in a full page, basically, the URL changes. What we're thinking is that instead, if you're within kind of this parent here, the objective, when you open a child, it opens in a modal. So Nick, is there anything you want to add there about this experience or like what we're solving?
I mean, my understanding of like the history of this goes back to epics and like a desire to basically be able to traverse an epic without leaving the epic, right? Because today, what you would do is you'd open the epic. Let's say you have 20 issues on the epic. If you wanted to like do stuff with those, you're gonna sit and open 20 tabs, and then people are like, "This sucks. I have like my browser's crashing because I have all my GitLab tabs open." So we've been exploring ways to do that in a more modular fashion, where you're never actually leaving sort of the root page. You're just opening the child things on top of it under the assumption that you're like basically using this as a collection, like you would a board or other list.
Cool. So yeah, this is behind a feature flag right now, but we've gotten some feedback from internal users that are like, ah, why is this on a, in a modal? They want the full page. But the experience now, like Nick said, you can kind of navigate through the modal. Nick, you've created a lot of issues here. Thank you for that, like to follow up on some of the experience. And there's some kind of maybe weird things where like an objective, the parent is open on top of the parent. There's things we can play with, I think. But the immediate ask is that internal users are like, oh, how do I open this in a larger screen? How do I open the full page? You can still just, open in a new tab, or use the keyboard, and that's easy enough, but they are wanting to do it from the modal itself. The proposal was just something like, have kind of that expand, but to me, and maybe I'm just overthinking, but to me, this doesn't really make sense because we are not expanding and collapsing this view. It's like going to another URL. It's another, like the full page view. It seems a little different to me. I was thinking maybe it could be like open in full page, right? Where it's more like a primary navigational object, or And I think someone had brought this up before, Nick, right? Where maybe you just allow the user to more explicitly open in a full page from the child item itself, which is maybe redundant, but just exposing that further. Or maybe we go kind of like other products where they can navigate from the breadcrumb itself, right? So like if they click on the object that they're already within, it would just open in the full view from the breadcrumbs. That's not super discoverable, but I don't know. This is my quick thinking on this. I was wondering if y'all have any thoughts of how to best switch from a modal to the full view. It's a pretty easy thing. It's just my brain is like looking too much into it. What are y'all's thoughts?
Yeah, I was
we
curious
have a
about-
similar interaction with comment field, right? So if you have that full screen expand in the comment field, is that similar, or you want to go back to the main page?
I think it's similar, but the comment field, you're expanding and collapsing something, whereas this, and again, maybe I'm just being too into the semantics. Like this is not expanding. It would basically be like instead of the, let's see, I'll just show you. It'd be opening up. Oh, I can't do it from there. So navigate the user to this full view of the child care instead of the modal view.
Right.
So expand, I guess, I think users would understand that, but I think it's more of like you're navigating, or maybe it would even open in a new tab. I think that would be overkill, but.
What is there a requirement for it to be a modal? Like why don't we just go straight to the object?
So that's what we do now. So if I click on a child object now, it just navigates to that child object. And that's kind of what I'm thinking here. Maybe we could still allow users to do that, but kind of like Nick was saying, the feedback was that the context switching, right, Nick, that allowing a user to just kind of quickly open up these objects and navigate them from the parent without navigating away.
Yeah.
I know, maybe that's kind of where I'm getting, Nick. I'm like, do we need to kind of like research the modal experience more?
I do know that there's an example of this from my experience, where if you click on the white space in the container, for example, it says child KR, and you were to click on that white space, it would pop up the modal. But if you were to click on the link directly, it would go to the object directly.
That can make sense. I think at some point we would want to allow users to drag and drop, right, to reorder, but maybe that could be like an edit mode. There's things you could do there. That would be, I guess, kind of similar to this one. It's just that we're adding more to this, but like just allowing them to open more explicitly.
I just know that as a user, if I know the interaction exists and I want to go power mode, and I was like, hold command on my keyboard and then just click on the title of every object, it goes straight to the thing. Versus if I just want to browse real quick, I can click on the white space and then the modal pops. Like, okay, move on to the next task or whatever.
Yeah, it might be. And I think we had talked about this before. And we're also going to be like looking at work items a whole lot now as part of an OKR. So but like maybe things like drawers, or if we have better inline editing, I wonder how this will impact the modal even, like, right, Nick? Like, how would that impact the experience? If the user can just edit from the child item itself, maybe we don't even need modals. Or if we opened it within a drawer, maybe it'd be a little less intrusive and people would feel less interrupted by the modal. I don't know. Things to think about. Maybe we need to push back on implementing this, but I know we have the MR going through already, so we'll think about it.
I mean, right now this only impacts OKRs. Because there's nothing in like tasks that is similar, and OKRs are only available to like like OKR specific project. There's like no customer facing stuff there. So I mean, it is like a relatively if we want to test something, like, that feels like a reasonable place to test it since it is internal only. But and this is kind of like a hard thing to test. I would think in Figma because like it relies so much on like browser stuff and like how you kind of implement that in Figma is, I mean, sure, you can capture like an escape button, but like no back buttons, no like normal stuff you might expect. So it could
Right.
be a way to test some of that, but yeah, I mean, I think what we're gonna end up with is like the main goal, which we're not there yet, is to be able to open these things from, let's say, a board or a list in some sort of modular view, like a drawer. We just got like customer feedback, I think on like Friday, of somebody that was really like, I can't believe I pay for an ultimate license for all these people and I can't do this. Like, it's such a waste of time to open everything in a new page. But that's not exactly the same as opening like child items from a page. So I mean, there's no inherent reason that says we have to do the same thing in both places.
That's what I was thinking that, like, maybe the rule is that there's certain views. I know, Dan, you had been looking at the different views too, but maybe in some views it opens in a modal or in a dialogue of some type, but maybe things like the child elements, it could default to just open in full page. Like maybe there's different needs, different jobs to be done across these different views. I'm not sure that this would always be the case, that they'd want a modal here. Anyway, back to the agenda, I guess. Dan M, you had a thought.
I was just half remembering using Jira and what the experience was, and I'm pretty sure I've got vague memories of just copying the URL of the modal that I'm on and then pasting it to force myself into a page view. And then when I saw this screenshot thing, I was like, oh, maybe there was a click on the breadcrumb thing as well, but I don't really remember. So it's just a waste of comment, really. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
No, you're totally right. Like it has like a link you could either copy, or if you click on the object, it's a little confusing because like if you click on the current object, it would navigate to the full view in Jira. Or if you click on one of the ancestors though, it would navigate to that ancestor within the modal itself. So it's a little mix and match, but it makes some sense.
Yeah, when you click the, in that example, I think it's KR2, it's like, oh, I know I'm here, but I want to really be here. So like that action of clicking it, whereas the parents is maybe like, oh, just show me these things.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah,
I was just curious, Alexis, do we know why they wanted
okay,
to
that's
go
good to
into
know
a bigger...
that this is... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was curious to, do we know why they wanted to go into a bigger view, like a full page view versus just the modal? Is there something they can't solve or do in the modal that they need the full page view for?
I think it's just, yeah, it's a good thing to investigate. And I think my PM is pushing to investigate this, and then some are pushing for just, it makes sense to have a modal, but I think it's just what they want to care about. If that's what they care about, they want to edit it in kind of a focus view, which is, or maybe it's just what they're used to. It's something we'll have to ask people, but I think that, and there's some kind of interactions we need to kind of iron out within these modals that maybe are kind of throwing people off. And Nick, you've already created a lot of issues around these where it's just not quite seamless yet. And maybe that's also frustrating. And they just kind of want to get back to their prior view. But right. I think it just anchors them. It's like, that's what I care about. And they want, even though it's like, this is kind of the focus view, that they just want that view they're used to, and they want to be editing in like full mode. But this is only internal users, so the feedback is kind of like biased as well. So, and I'm glad to hear, Nick. I didn't know that it was just OKRs, so that's good that we're scoping it just OKRs while we play with this.
For now, yeah, because I mean, there's no way to create like children on tasks, so you'd never have a comparable sort of experience there. I don't know, Dan, on I mean, requirements can be nested, so that would be probably the next place we'll run into this, I would guess. I think the use case for the full page is probably like the one I have heard is just because people want to have multiple tabs open and be able to like, you know, pull up maybe like this KR next to that KR, which you can't really, like you can pull up a KR and close it and then pull up another one and close it in a modal, but you can't like do it side by side without opening them in separate tabs.
Right.
Which
Like some-
where the drawer
yeah.
would be helpful. Yeah. All right. Well, that is a fun one. And then also, I just wanted to bring this up also to, oops, move the tab to Dan and Nick, especially because we're working on this, but there was also an ask within OKRs to change the type. So let's say we're on a key result. I want to change this to a objective, which is larger, basically. So it's kind of that promotion action, but we are starting with from scratch with the work items, so we can improve that promotion experience. And I think like the general idea is like, instead of closing the object, so for example, now if you have an issue, you promote it to an epic, it just closes the issue and still kind of keeps it attached to the epic, but then it, you know, promotes to an epic. So you have like this kind of closed thing floating around that's not relevant anymore. So in the future, it's just going to kind of transform into the new object instead of closing the old record and keeping it around, which I think is good. But the idea of picking and kind of like changing this key result to a objective is kind of the small thing we're trying to solve now. And I think like the most MVC, kind of like what we have now, would be adding another field. So you say type objective key result, which what I don't like about this is like we're taking up more space within these fields that we're already getting feedback about. And there's only 2 types to choose from here. So really it's just like, do I want this to be a key result or objective? It doesn't seem like a drop down would be necessary. I played around with kind of putting this within the breadcrumbs as well. So you're picking here what the type is. I think what would be the smallest change here would be either promoting to objective or just saying like change to objective, maybe within the overflow menu, and change there. I don't know, what do y'all think about that? If you wanted to just promote or change this item to its parent item. If any of these call to you.
Which question do you want answered first? Do any of these call to
any
you, or
of
what do you
them.
think about the thing?
Well, all the things, because yeah, I need coffee, but just lay it all on me.
Let's do this the small one first. I really like the improved guidance option. I think it helps the product be more opinionated, and I suspect that showing what the strong opinions are will help users use it in a way that is less likely to break for them and result in a better experience.
Awesome.
And then the hard question is, do you think there's any difference between changing a key result to an objective and changing a task to an issue? And does your opinion change if it goes from an issue to a task? But what about if and does it change again if we go from an issue to an objective? And is the real ask here for an MVC, what's a pattern that just allows change in type, regardless of what the from and to is?
Yep. Yeah, I don't know exactly where we're calling out just OKRs. That's why I want to keep it as small as possible. I think it is, we need to think through the larger experience of like, okay, this is why I tried to scope it down just to promotion, because I think like that demotion has a lot of larger questions, especially like what if this thing has children? What happens to them? How do you manage children when you're changing to an object that can't have children, or the attributes are different? we are preserving all of the fields attributes, like any data entered. So like when the user transforms from one object to the other, it preserves it. So like you can kind of roll back that change more easily. But yeah, I do agree. It's a larger discussion. I think there's an issue around it or an epic around it in project management, Nick, around changing the type of work items. So for this one, because it's an ask for this OKR, the SEG project for internal users, it's more around like, oops, I created a KR. I meant it to be an objective. I want it to be apparent. So that's why I've been working to scope it down really small. And I was thinking that like something like this seems a decent MVC while we think through the larger experience of like just changing it to any type, both up or down the hierarchy. This would be just one level up hierarchy. The KRs can't have children, can't have anything. And then we need to definitely spend more time thinking through that larger experience of task to epic, or epic to task, which would be more difficult. Does that answer your question? It's basically like, make it small for now.
I think my sassy designer persona would have gone, let me show you the copy and paste buttons so that you can just quickly move it and see if and work out how many copy and pastes would be needed before we saw a return on the development time. But Nick's got a point.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it is. Are the fields any different? Like any different between an objective and a curious? Well, I guess I could answer this myself, but
objectives have children. That's really the big difference there at the moment. So not really at the moment.
Okay, and you're only considering as MVC allowing KRs to become objectives, not the other way around. Or
yeah, I scoped it down, thankfully, to just KR to objective for now.
Okay, so you're never having to deal with like data loss or anything like that, like you would if you were moving an objective to a KR that had child objectives or something.
No, I think that's going to be a larger, what do we do with the children? But we do preserve the data in the back end, but I think that's it's still a larger discussion for sure.
Yeah, that's one the devs keep pushing back on me on, because I keep saying it'd be great to preserve the data, and they keep saying it'd be great to delete the data.
Oh gosh, okay. Yes, I know.
But well, sometimes you'll have to delete the data because it'll be like in conflict. But if we don't have to, it'd be great if we didn't. Yeah, that's only like consideration. Like that's my concern with like the field, or one of my concerns, the other being the space it takes up, is that like if we like in every other case other than this, we're probably going to have to prompt the user to be like, hey, like this isn't going to migrate, or like you might lose something, like confirm you want to do this, right? Like if you do that in Jira, like you'll run into this occasionally where it's like, this isn't available here, like what do you want to do with it? Anytime you might be destroying something, and it doesn't really feel like obvious that like how you would handle that there, whereas like the more like top level actions, it seems a bit more clear that you could be like, oh, there's a prompt and then things below are going to change, and like it's sort of restructuring the thing you're looking at.
Yeah, it almost has more weight to it, and then you're going to be like reconfiguring all the children, or maybe things are disabled for MVC, but there's a lot more thinking there. So what I'm hearing is to keep this very small, which I think maybe something like this is almost copy paste, right? Just make it bigger for now. And we have this pattern with promotion. Or Dan, I can get more snarky, perhaps. Cool. But yeah, this is upcoming. I'm sure we'll have to, as one of our OKRs on plan, we'll have to think through this experience of changing type.
There was some chat about this on the plan call. I don't know if you caught up with it. It was buried in the middle of something. If not, I can try and
was it the don't use the promotion language one?
I think it was all tied up in that. My 2 pence on it all is I think we can probably have some good opinions for what the default behavior is. And we shouldn't let that stop us from doing the stuff. Like, I'm sure we could say for certain types, hey, just make the children a child of whatever this thing's parent was, if possible. And opinions like that, I think would be okay to have. Yeah, something like I'm sure is in this here.
Yeah, like I think it would just kind of stay in the hierarchy if possible, but yeah, we would have to think about what if it moves up, or like what if it detaches? What do we want to do there? So, all right, to be continued. I don't want to hog. I mean, I already have hogged this entire time, but thank y'all.
I do think, Alexis, the menu item that I think you're kind of like, maybe this is the easiest one, is probably the most extensible, which I kind of like, because right now, like, you could basically make that change to objective right now, and then it would be like a really nice transition to make that change type. And then you just select, you know, a type or something like that. And then we can prompt, like we can do any of the messaging or prompting and like whatever follows from there. I'm not like the Jira style one's fine too, although I find that like a fairly hard to discover pattern, as like you noted.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a bad thing necessarily, but yeah, it is harder to discover, that's for sure. So you're talking about the one that's like a new field within all the other attributes?
No, I'm talking about the one that's in the in the actions menu. Just have like
nice, yeah,
change to objective, and then like later we could make that change type, and then you know you could pick whatever types are available. We can explain why certain types are not available if we need to. Like you know we can do that kind of in like a modal or something where it's a bit more focused.
and then it could be like a wizard almost. If you know if it's more complicated, it just goes to the next step where you have to reconfigure children, etc. Yeah.
Because we're like one of the scenarios that we're gonna have for that is like, let's say you're changing, like let's say we allow you to change like an objective to an epic or something. So like then what do you do with all the KRs that hang off of it? Like we might want to prompt them to like keep it as KRs or like convert them to issue. Like there's a whole workflow that's gonna follow for some of that I think is gonna require a bit more stuff to manage.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. Lieber and Daniel, are you like, what? What is this?
No, I'm just listening because I think a lot of it's pretty interesting. I was just kind of mimicking or thinking about what Libor had brought up there.
Yeah, I was thinking about it as well, too. I feel like I like Nick's approach, maybe thinking about it more as like the type. We change the type versus, you know, kind of the way it is now. But yeah, it just seems like sometimes when, you know, you're trying to make a product, you know, more generic and more flexible, it just seems confusing. Like, okay, why can I do this in a task versus like a relationship versus like a KR versus OKR versus like task, subtask, or like, you know, stuff like that. So I think maybe doing it, you know, calling it a type that's changing makes more sense. But yeah, it could get confusing. Yeah, like when you try to build like a really complicated Swiss Army knife, you're like, okay, which one should I use for what now? You know, which knife? So
No, that's a good point. It's a really good point. And maybe the Parkers might understand some of this, but even they could use education. Yeah, you know how this is, right? You're working on the converting from Jira, so I'm sure you've got enough feedback.
One thing that I was going to point out is that I think there needs to be a strong definition of what the parent and child relationship is, and the idea of going from OKR to KR or vice versa, that needs to be strongly defined. And I think once you have that, a lot of this kind of it's more easily solved, or less second guessing, so to speak, right? But that's up for, I guess, perhaps a study or usability session or something, asking what is your experience in this context, right? What would you prefer this, you know, hierarchy structure to be?
Yep, sure is. And OKRs are kind of different because again, this is like a SAG project, so we haven't really done testing, except for this internal testing with internal users right now. But that's a really good point, Daniel. Because we are doing all work items about.
Yeah, good stuff. It's an interesting problem, but I have to jump. I get the kiddo to school, so but it was good chatting with you all.
Yeah, thanks for listening, y'all. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Bye. Have a good one all.
Yeah.